we are now joined by the newest member of the On3 team, the best in the business, Andy Staples. Andy, how we doing, man? Welcome to the team.
We are doing great, JD, and very happy to be here. It's weird being on this side of the podcast, and we're on a live show, and I can't see the YouTube comments, and it's kind of driving me crazy because now I want to know what everybody's mad about.
They're probably all just saying nice things. They're probably all saying they're glad to have you here. They're excited for college football season. But Andy, you're doing this show right now live from Gainesville, Florida, so I feel like there's no better way to tee this up than talk about the Florida Gators. What do you make of what's going on with Billy Napier right now? Because it feels like everybody has a strong opinion, whether it's positive or negative. What are you anticipating for them in 2023?
You know, Vegas and the FPI, that you're looking at between 5 and 7 wins is what they're saying. I think the higher side of that is probably fairly realistic. The question I have for Florida is, what do you look like this season? Because I'm not expecting them to win the SEC East or win the SEC title. But what do you look like in the games against the Georgias and against the LSUs? And also, how is the recruiting going? You look at the way they've been recruiting, especially in the last month, their finalist lists are looking a lot better than they did about 2 years ago. And that's really what they hired Billy Napier to do. They hired Billy Napier to build a roster that looks more like the rosters you see at Georgia, at Alabama, at LSU. To do that, you got to beat those guys for players every once in a while. It's not something Florida was doing under the previous staff. It feels like they're in the mix a lot more now, and they're getting some of those guys. The thing is, it's not an instant fix. You know, their roster was not in a place. It wasn't like what Brian Kelly walked into at LSU, where there were already some really good players there that Ed Orgeron had left behind. Their roster, other than Anthony Richardson last year, wasn't a lot of special on it. And it's their job to go find more special. And I think that's what they're trying to do. Now, it's not easy. And so I want to see what they do when they're playing those teams. How hard do they fight? You know, how hard are they playing for Billy Napier? And then are some of the young guys, the guys that you're saying, oh, that's the most promising guy on the roster. You know, I think Trevor Etienne, the running back, we know he's going to be pretty good. But Andy Jean, the freshman receiver, they got a guy named Eugene Wilson coming in, another freshman receiver. Can those guys be playmakers right off the bat? You know, Kelby Collins, who was a guy that they beat those big dogs out for in recruiting, is he doing well coming off the edge? That's the type of thing I want to see.
It's funny because there's so much talk about Graham Mertz and all the criticism that comes with him from his time at Wisconsin and who Florida maybe could have gone on in the portal. To me, it feels like if Graham Mertz can just be serviceable, like if he's just consistent 7 out of 10 every single game in terms of, not hurting your team and giving the ball to the defense, I feel like they have a lot of pieces there, like you said, with that backfield with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, to where Florida could be a team that makes some moves if that defense is just deeper for them.
It depends. It's interesting because they lose Gervon Dexter to the NFL on the D-line, but I think they do feel like they're going to be a little bit deeper up front on defense. Cam Jackson's the transfer from Memphis. He's the nose. Caleb Banks, the transfer from Louisville, they like a lot. And they got some younger guys that are moving up. That's a position group where they have needed to be better for quite some time. And Gervon Dexter, as good as he was, it felt like he was just getting all of the offensive line's attention for a lot of the time. So I think that group needs to be better. But you mentioned Graham Mertz. Unless some of those receivers, other than Ricky Pearsall, blow up, I don't know how good Graham Mertz can be. So that's the thing. You feel pretty good about their backfield. We're not sure about their offensive line, though it should be fine. But who are the guys that Graham Mertz can throw to? Who are the guys that they can rely on to make a play?
Well, another team in the state of Florida that's getting a lot of love right now, Florida State. I mean, tons of hype from the way they finished the year, and a lot of it, quite frankly, is well-deserved. Is there too much hype on Florida State right now? Is there too much being said positively about them before we've seen what we need to see in 23?
So I know they want to move to the SEC, but they're not moving to the SEC this season, right?
No, that does not happen. They're in the state of Florida, they're competing for SEC recruits, not in the SEC.
Right. So as long as they don't have to play in the SEC this season, they're fine. And this is an interesting thing because I've made this comparison quite a bit in the offseason because it is – there's some truth to it. you look at what Mike Norvell has done at Florida State, and that is the hope of what Billy Napier can do at Florida. But the difference is by playing in the ACC, Mike Norvell has been able to do it in a different way at Florida State. You can get competitive through the transfer portal in the ACC, and that's exactly what they've done. They have a team that can compete with just about anybody in the ACC. We'll see when they play Clemson in early September or in late September how that looks. We'll get a good look at how they stack up against a team with really elite talent when they play LSU in the opener. But they've done a great job spot recruiting out of the portal, and then they've improved, and they're using that to try to get better players out of high school. And once they start doing that, and you're starting to see that now, but give that a few years, and suddenly you have a very sustainable program that can compete anywhere. I'm not sure Florida could pull that off. I don't think there's enough quality in the transfer portal to do that in the SEC. Like, Florida's going to have to build through the draft. Florida State has a team that can compete right now for the ACC title. They've built that offensive line back up. Johnny Wilson blows up coming from Arizona State last year. Now they bring in Keon Coleman from Michigan State, who not like Johnny Wilson. You know, Johnny Wilson didn't do much at Arizona State, then came and Florida State figured out how to use him. Keon Coleman was Michigan State's best receiver last year. Like, Jordan Travis is going to have some fun throwing to him.
You look across the roster, and I don't see a ton of weaknesses for Florida State. My one question is the spotlight too bright too quickly? Because Florida State kind of popped last year and snuck up on a lot of people, and now this coming season, a lot of people are saying, well, are they a dark horse college football playoff team? Are they going to win the ACC? And I don't know if they're a playoff team this coming season, but once the college football playoff expands, Andy, I think Florida State's going to be a force every single year to be in that top 12. Talked about the SEC a little bit previously with Florida. Two schools leaving for the SEC next year in Texas and OU. There's a lot of pressure on them, especially Texas, to win the Big 12 and to finally make good on all of the expectations they've had in the previous seasons. For both these teams, what win totals would make you feel comfortable to springboard them into the SEC between Texas and OU?
Well, I was listening to your misconception show from earlier this week, JD, and I got to take issue with one of the things you said. You said if Texas doesn't have a great double-digit win season, then it's still okay. It is not okay. They're going to be favored in 11 of 12 games. Like, they should be dominant this season. They should be very good. They should win the Big 12 this season. If they don't, you got a problem. If they lose to Oklahoma, you got a problem. Because right now, they're in a better situation talent-wise relative to Oklahoma than they've been in years. And the rest of the Big 12, not even close to them in terms of on-paper talent. So you'd better win that, because you're about to go to a place where the on-paper talent becomes much closer and in some cases better than yours. So you better be able to beat K-State, TCU, and these are very good programs with great coaches. If you can't beat them this year, you got a problem when you get to the SEC.
Yeah, Andy, I mean, we're in agreements here. We're in lockstep. The misconception for me is the people in Austin, Texas saying, if we don't win the Big 12 outright, failure of a season. I'm with you. They need to win double-digit football.
They're exactly right. It's a failure if they don't win the Big 12.
Really? In your mind, it is. Well, so if they get to...
What are you? Are you Giannis here? Like, yeah, no. It's...
I'd like to be Giannis. That'd be a good way to live.
They're the best team on paper. They should win the league. Like, if you don't do that, you didn't do what you didn't reach your potential.
I mean, they only won 8 games a season ago. If they get to Dallas and they lose by a field goal, is it really a failure of a season, Andy?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
See, we gotta get your takes hotter, JD. This is me, the veteran, coming to you. Like, we gotta have some hot takes here. But this reminds me a little bit of in 2015. I went on Feinbaum, and he asked me a question about Georgia. This is preseason, and I said if Georgia isn't competing for the national title, competing for the SEC title, they need to ask some really hard questions, because it's the best job in America, and they should be in the mix every year. They won 10 games that season. And I remember the day that came out on Feinbaum in the preseason, people in my mentions on Twitter just went nuts. They're like, what are you talking about? You're insane. Well, they fired Mark Richt, they hired Kirby Smart, and it feels like some things changed. So that's the thing with Texas. If Sark can get these guys to their potential, great. If he can't, you need to think about that.
Well, I mean, I think that's a fair point. I think it's a very fair point. And let's stick in that vein of misconceptions. Ohio State and Ryan Day, 0 for 2 the last 2 tries against Michigan. I mean, in terms of what Ohio State needs to do this coming season, are they a team that you think is set for a bounce back, which sounds weird to say as they made the college football playoff? Do they have a team? Are they going to beat Michigan this coming season, Andy? I guess is really what I want to get down to. Should they beat Michigan?
That's a great question. I was laughing when Michigan, Bruce Feldman went on the Move the Six podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and mentioned that they have the beat Georgia drill now at Michigan, which means they're thinking a little more globally. But man, I'd be pissed off if I was Ohio State and I heard that. Like, whoa, we're still here. But I do. Here's the deal with Ohio State. It's very interesting because so much psychological damage from those 2 losses to Michigan. But if we're being real here, Ohio State is 1 defensive stop away from being the national champion because they would have beaten TCU. So where are they really? And where they are is they're one of the best teams in the country still. They do need to beat Michigan, yes. But do they have to beat Michigan to win the national title? Well, I think we learned last year that's not true. They could have won the national title despite having lost to Michigan. It will be much easier starting next year to do that because there'll be a 12-team playoff and they won't have to beat Michigan. But for Ryan Day's sake, he needs to beat Michigan. Don't allow those John Cooper comparisons to fester. Like, don't do that. You know, I think people we talk about misconceptions. Job description is important. It's important to, I'm talking to Nick Saban about this years ago. Like, when you're in a job, it's very important for your bosses or your employers or your stakeholders to tell you exactly what the expectations are. So let me tell you what the expectations are for Ryan Day at Ohio State. Win the national championship. That's it. Those are the expectations. And the longer he goes without one, the madder they get. So he needs to put them in a position to win the national title. Now, did he do that last year? He absolutely did. So you keep doing that and you're fine. But you do probably need to beat Michigan because here's the other thing. If you can't beat Michigan, look at Penn State right now. Penn State's dude factor is getting higher. It feels like they can be competitive with those 2 this year. USC's coming into the league. They're recruiting really well. You've got Luke Fickell at Wisconsin now. Luke Fickell helped Urban Meyer build Ohio State into the monster that it is. Ryan Day's level of difficulty is going up. So it's not going to be that easy to dominate, not like it was the first couple of years in the league. Now it gets more challenging. But again, if he has them in a position to win the national title every year, he's fine. If you have a few years where you're not fine.
Yeah, I think I think the sentiment probably grows stronger and stronger. If they were to win the national title a year ago, that Michigan loss never sits well with anybody in Columbus, but maybe they're able to maybe it goes down a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you talk about expectations. Alabama, the expectation is very, very clear there every single year with Nick Saban, win a national title. And this is the first time in a while where there's a little bit larger of a question mark in Tuscaloosa as to what they're going to be. Now, Andy, I'm of the opinion that I believe that Nick Saban kind of thrives in situations like this with history as our teacher. Doesn't feel outrageously important to me who ends up playing quarterback for them because I think it'll be a little bit more line of scrimmage centric. What are your thoughts? What do you make of Alabama this coming season?
I think Alabama is still going to be very good. Alabama's roster is still going to be one of the best in the country. They're still going to be capable of competing for the SEC title and the national title. Now, the question is, do they find a quarterback good enough to get them there? They've been spoiled the last couple of years with Bryce Young. Clearly, they did not feel anybody won that job coming out of the spring. That's why they went and got Tyler Buchner, and that's where the alarm bells went off because they've been recruiting five-star quarterbacks. You'd think one of those guys would be ready. Now, I'm fully on the Dylan Lonergan train because I saw one series in the spring game and he was just dealing. So I'm ready to go with that. But no, who's it probably going to be? Well, Tyler Buchner has run Tommy Rees's offense. Tyler Buchner was the day one starter at Notre Dame last year before he got hurt. So that would make sense. But I'm with you. I think people may be undervaluing Alabama because of what happened last year, but let's be real about what happened last year. They lost 2 games by a total of 4 points against very, very good teams. So I am not ready to just declare the Nick Saban dynasty over. I do have some questions because I found it interesting that Kirby Smart at Georgia has now seemingly created the coaching pipeline that Saban used to have, where if somebody left, you just pluck this guy who you've already had, or somebody's in the family, like Bill O'Brien was a Belichick guy, so you could just grab him. They didn't do that with the offensive coordinator. They did a real search. So I do wonder if that's different, or is that a case of maybe they do need some new blood? So we'll see what happens. But yes, Alabama is still very good. Well, let us not declare the Saban dynasty over just quite yet.
And it feels like now he has everybody exactly where he wants them. Oh, poor Alabama. Alabama's not going to be as good as they were. Oh, is Alabama going to be able to bounce back? And, I mean, history as our teacher, again, typically Bama and Saban bounce back in a very emphatic fashion. Andy, last question for you.
He likes having a way to motivate. He does not – like, coming off a national title is hard to motivate. There's no challenge in motivating these guys.
Yeah, there's no shortage of bulletin board material for the good folks in Tuscaloosa. Andy, last thing I want to ask you about, let's go out to the West Coast. How about USC? To me, it feels like this has to be the year for them to get through and make the college football playoff because Caleb Williams ain't coming back for another year. True or untrue?
JD, when's the last time Lincoln Riley had a bad starting quarterback?
Yeah, it's been a minute.
How many Heisman Trophy winners does Lincoln Riley has as starting quarterback?
Let's see. Murray, Mayfield, Williams, Jalen Hurts did a lot in the NFL. So
yeah, Jalen Hurts is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So I think they're going to be okay. I think probably they're going to have other good quarterbacks after Caleb Williams. So I don't think they have to do it this year. But it'll probably be easier to do it this year in the Pac-12 than it will be once they get into the Big Ten. That said, this is about as deep as of a Pac-12 as I can remember. So I'm not as worried about anything going on with USC's offense. I think they're going to be fine offensively. Is that defense better? Can they tackle as the season goes on? You know, I feel like the body types have definitely improved on the D-line. You go get Anthony Lucas, you go get Barry Alexander out of the transfer portal. I'd like to see more of that coming out of high school because that's how Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, that's how they build national title teams. But I like where they're going with that. I need to see it on the field defensively, though, because they're going to be playing some really high-powered offenses in the Pac-12 to get, through the Pac-12, win the league. You're going to have to deal with Utah. You're going to have to deal with Washington. You're going to deal with Oregon. Oregon State is going to be very good in a very physical way. So this will be a good test for them.
Andy, would it not feel like USC – wasted's a strong word, but would it not feel like they kind of wasted Caleb Williams if they don't at least play for a national title in 23? Because, I feel like he's generational talent, best player in college football, along with Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, but, he's on campus right now. Does it not feel like they got to strike while the iron's hot right now?
Well, they got to put a defense on the field that is worthy of being opposite Caleb Williams. That's the bigger problem. And that, let's be real, that's been the problem since Lincoln Riley's been a head coach. He has to put a defense on the field that is worthy of being opposite that offense. We know that offense is great. The offense is not the problem. That's not what's going to keep them from winning a national title or playing for a national title. So it's really up to Alex Grinch and company to field a defense that deserves to compete for those things.
Got to be able to tackle. 156 missed tackles last season for USC. That's Andy
Staples. 7 on him on the one play against Utah in the Pac-12. The third team. He started the season as the third team tight end. And he broke at least 84 tackles on one run.
Yeah, the low light reel is tough to watch for the people in USC when it comes to what they did defensively. As I was saying, that's Andy Staples. Andy, we're going to get together at the SEC Media Day, talk some ball, talk about everything in the SEC. Let the good people know where they can find your work and what they can expect from the podcast.
Well, so we'll be on the On3 YouTube channel, just like this show. It's a very similar situation. We're going to be the primetime show. We're going to do a daily show. We'll be going live pretty frequently. We haven't quite nailed down the schedule of how often we'll be going live. But also, if you like to listen in podcast form, It's going to be uploaded to all your favorite podcast platforms. So we'll do the show at night. It'll be ready for you as a podcast for your commute in the morning. So any way you want it, we'll have it. And I'll be posting the clips all over social media. Andy_Staples on pretty much all the social media platforms. I joined Threads. I don't know about you, JD. I joined Threads last night. Same username as Twitter and Instagram, Andy_Staples. So basically, I'll either be talking to this microphone or posting on 700 social media sites.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Andy, speak for everybody here. So fired up to be working with you. Excited to have you on 3. And this will not be the last time we do this, man.
Thank you, JD. Appreciate it.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.